Hello, and welcome to Spokane County Spotlight. I'm your County Commissioner, Josh Kerns, and joining me today is Jake Mayson, Director of Public Policy for Greater Spokane Incorporated. Jake, it's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Great to be here. So glad I can make it.
Yeah. Before we dive in to the conversation around what Greater Spokane Incorporated or GSI has been working on, why don't you give our audience today a little introduction to yourself, a little bit of background, and where you come from.
Absolutely. So I'm a recent Spokane transplant. I came here about a year ago to take this job to work at GSI. But prior to that, I had worked in the state legislature for a number of years, both in a senator's office, but also then later working on advocacy for small and large businesses on the Hill there. Ran a few campaigns and that kind of stuff, and was very lucky to be invited to apply to the GSI position here and moved to beautiful Spokane, and I couldn't be happier.
All right, it's an amazing place to call home.
Absolutely.
So I'm gonna think most of our viewers are familiar with Greater Spokane Incorporated, that they've heard of them. But if there's anybody new to our community that maybe isn't as familiar with them, could you tell us a little bit about what is Greater Spokane Incorporated?
Absolutely. GSI is at its core kind of a hybrid organization. We started off way back in the late 1800s as the Spokane Chamber of Commerce. And kind of through the decades and over a lot of molding and melding, we've incorporated a lot of different jobs into kind of what GSI is and what we do. At some point, we were the tourism center that's been spun out into Visit Spokane, but the two kind of core mantles that we've taken on as an organization has been that of the Regional Chamber of Commerce, but also as an economic development authority. So we serve as the Associate Development Organization, which is designated by the county. We also serve a federal purpose that is kind of very much in line with that, with the U.S. Economic Development Authority. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, we're a Chamber of Commerce, just like every other community has. It's a membership organization that businesses pay into for all kinds of different benefits, including networking opportunities, kind of broad marketing, as well as, I think, most importantly, advocacy on their behalf.
Well, so it sounds like there's quite a diverse portfolio of things you're involved with. How does that play in with your role of Director of Public Policy? What does your position specifically focus on, and what's kind of the day-to-day operations look like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. The kind of dual role, the hybrid stuff, has opened a lot of opportunities for us to kind of focus on the area where our employer community intersects with our community needs and what makes our economy grow. So really looking through those three lenses, the intersection of all those three areas is where I'm best utilized, because that way I'm working on behalf of both of our kind of roles in the community. And that really frames how I think about policy issues, about working with our elected officials, being, of course, able to work with you on the county commission, as well as the other commissioners and the city council. A lot of what I'm doing is really talking about the big ideas that we have as a community for where we need to grow and where our best opportunities are to bring good jobs to the community, as well as protecting the business community, making sure that the folks that are already here are given the tools that they need to grow and expand and to keep those jobs here. So a lot of the day-to-day is talking to folks like you, leaders in our community, and discussing the business perspective of what's happening here in Spokane, as well as in the state and over in DC.
Okay. Well, so you mentioned watching what's going on, in the state. This time of year, the state legislature is in session. So like people joke, so nobody's wallets are safe.
Exactly.
But when you look at the state with the legislature in session, I know that there's always a ton of bills that are pre-filed, many that are filed at the beginning of session. Are there any specific issues that you're tracking in Olympia? The kind of GSI is like, these are the key bills that we are supporting. These are the key bills that we are not supporting. So any big issues that have emerged so far in the session that you're keeping your eye on?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the kind of aphorisms about the Spokane community is that when we really unite behind a single issue, we do really good work. We do very well in Olympia. And so a great example of that is the University District and the medical school. It's the North Spokane Corridor, kind of those big projects that we have a giant hill to climb. Our community is really good about uniting and going to do that work in Olympia. The challenge for the time in between having those giant hills to climb is, where do we find consensus and where do we find spaces that the entire community can agree around? So that's been the work of basically the past year to get to these 4 priorities that we're working on in Olympia. The first of that being business, taxation, and fiscal policy. We're looking to protect our businesses here, make sure that we have one of the highest tax burdens in the nation, and a lot of that's focused on our business community. So we're really playing a lot of defense when it comes to Olympia and what they like to do to business owners. So that's our number 1 priority in Olympia. That will, I believe, kind of continue to be a solid foundation for everything that we do. And then outside of that, we're really working on medical licensure. I think the COVID pandemic really opened up people's eyes to the fact that we have very qualified healthcare workers in our community right now that are restricted by state law as far as what they're allowed to do under what level of supervision. And we're doing a lot of work right now to make especially kind of those first jobs in healthcare more accessible to people. A great example of that is what we're doing with phlebotomists. Currently, the state law, once you're able to be paid for your training. So if you go work for a blood bank or a hospital or a laboratory, you're training as a phlebotomist, they're paying you while you're going through all of your training. And you're actually required by law to be interacting and drawing blood from patients under supervision as part of that. But also under state law, as soon as you finish that and submit your paperwork to the Department of Health, you're not allowed to practice. And during the pandemic, that wait went from a couple weeks to a couple months or even more for some.
Oh, wow.
So the people who don't have the ability to forego a paycheck or 2 or 3 while they're waiting for their license to come back, we're making sure that they're going to have the opportunity to continue working to make those jobs more accessible and help grow that healthcare workforce here in Spokane. The other really big area that we've been pushing on, this is again in healthcare, is joining some sort of federal or regional nurse licensure compact. We have a lot of nurses here that are either here with the Air Force, their spouses in the Air Force. We've been working very closely with Fairchild on this priority for a number of years. There are dozens and dozens of qualified RNs in our community who have been practicing for years in other states who, because Washington State hasn't joined this kind of federal consortium of states who have all agreed that, these nurses who have been practicing without any issues for years, they should be allowed to continue practicing in our state. Because Washington isn't a part of that, we have all these folks that are either underemployed, they're doing some other work, or they're choosing not to participate in the workforce. And healthcare is really where we need that support right now. So we're doing quite a lot of that. And then other than that, there's a lot of economic development priorities. There's all kinds of things that we're working with the Washington Economic Development Authority on, whether that's more support for new programs that support infrastructure that help get businesses here, or any number of things. That we kind of have that joke that everything's economic development, and so we're really trying to help make sure that we all have the resources that we need to bring good jobs and good companies here. Yeah,
and I do want to kind of highlight the thing you said at the beginning there, where you said when we come together as a community, we can accomplish some big things. What you talked about the north-south corridor. You talked about the medical school and what that has blown up into with the U district down there. I mean, both of those pieces of both of the legislation that was passed to make each of those things a reality was during the time where I was a staffer over there in Olympia. And just to see everybody from the region come together, from the legislators to the groups advocating, coming in and lobbying those local legislators. I mean, it really was a team effort, getting everybody together to rally around both of those things. I mean, it's fascinating to watch. I mean, and it's and unfortunately you don't always see that in Olympia. That doesn't always work out that way, but when it does, It really is quite a sight.
Absolutely.
And then to the specific piece of policy you referenced, have there been bills introduced to address each of those things this session?
Yeah, absolutely. So
Okay,
the Nurse
great.
Licensure Compact, that bill has been written. We're expecting it to drop in this
Okay.
next week or so.
Great, great.
We've kind of had this, this period of pre-filing, right,
Yeah.
where a bunch of stuff comes through, and then there's a lot of other things that folks are working on that kind of get dropped throughout the session. So
Okay.
we expect that one to come out here pretty shortly. But we did pre-file a bill that is kind of a rolled-up bill with a bunch of other medical assistant. The phlebotomists are in this state classified as a medical assistant, and so that bill is dropped. That's Senate Bill 5181. We have our first hearing on that as of taping in about an hour.
Okay.
So
Wonderful.
I'll be rushing off to that.
Okay.
And yeah, so a lot of those priorities are already there. Much of the economic development stuff is budget asks of one kind of or another. Many of them were included in the governor's budget. Some of them were not. So
All right.
all these little pieces are. They're everywhere. So.
Yeah. So if we jump to the other Washington, what are some of the things you guys are advocating for on the national level?
Gosh, all kinds of stuff. Most of what we're doing is working to make these kind of really large nationwide pieces of legislation more accessible to regions and communities our size. Much of the work that we did on, say, the CHIPS Act or the IIJA, we're looking at reducing barriers to entry for smaller communities, whether that's right-sizing kind of the project scope for a lot of things or making the process more transparent and more accessible. So a lot of those kinds of priorities have been what we're working on the federal level. And there's, of course, a ton of issues around, again, the healthcare sector. Much of how medical residencies are proportioned out throughout the nation, that's actually federally controlled. So there's a lot of work that we can be doing to help our medical school that is here now access more local residencies. And the data suggests that if you do your residency in a community, you're much more likely to stay there.
Yep.
So we need some really great doctors here in Spokane, and we're looking forward to the work that we can do to bring them here.
Okay, and and then with all the advocacy you've been doing at the state level and with the federal level for a long time, it does seem recently you have been getting involved a lot more on sort of local advocacy, working on local municipalities. Can you tell us about some of the work you've done there?
Yeah, absolutely. Much of our work is member driven. So we'll hear a lot from local community and business owners who are worried about the rash of retail theft. Right? They're like, we're losing a lot of money on this. We have many of our hardware stores in town are some of the highest loss hardware stores in the state due to theft and loss. I think you probably heard about the fire in the Home Depot that was set in order to steal batteries, those kinds of things. So we're really working with some of our newly elected folks, especially the sheriff's office, and with other elected leaders to organize around retail crime. And there's this whole kind of system, it's crazy when you really dig into it, of people that are organizing these giant thefts, right? So you've seen some smash and grabs and that kind of stuff, mostly on the west side in Seattle, where it's getting a little bit more violent. We really have an opportunity as a community to preempt some of that and kind of nip it in the bud when it comes to these kind of emerging retail theft crime rings that are starting to pop up. So really engaged there. And then a lot of what we've heard from our different members has to do with taxation and licensure and the city council in Spokane, working with them on making sure that starting a business is still accessible to anybody who wants to kind of get involved and help our community in that way. So
that's great.
Yeah, a broad array of things, but
all very, very important things you're involved with, for sure. Every year, GSI does an Olympia fly-in, and there's one of those coming up. Could you tell us sort of how that's shaping up and what some of the unique things that happen on trips like that and how it really connects folks with their legislators? Yeah,
absolutely. I've worked in a number of communities and for a number of different trade associations across the state. Most recently, I was in Yakima with the home builders, but prior to that, I worked for a number of different trade associations, landscape architects, associated builders and contractors. And every year everybody knew when Spokane was in town because we bring 100+ people out to Olympia and really make a showing. And I think it's really indicative of what we as a community are able to rally behind and really come together on those issues. So every year, this year we're going out there January 25th through 27th. I'm excited to have you and Ron come out and we'll have a great time talking to legislators and taking those meetings. But it's a ton of elected leadership, a ton of business leadership, and it really is an opportunity for us to look at what we agree on as a community, and everybody does a really great job of going in and talking about what's next for Spokane, what can help move our community forward, and really what can we do to protect the growth that we are experiencing here, and how do we do that in a way that makes it comfortable and accessible to everybody.
Yeah, I think it is. It's a great way to get folks together from so many different sectors. I mean, because there's business, there's healthcare, there's education, there's government. I mean, you name it. There's somebody that has a connection to a specific field or an issue in Olympia. And I mean, emails are great, to communicate with elected officials. Phone calls are good, but really face to face, and that really I think has an impact. And so I think it's great that GSI continues to do this, to set this up every year. It's a great way to go connect face to face during session with our local team of legislators that head on over there and advocate on our behalf.
Some of the cooler connections that happen are, of course, between the folks that we're bringing out and the legislators, but that opportunity to all be together in kind of a different place and work together. There's a lot of connections that happen between our elected leadership and our business leadership. We have a bunch of superintendents coming, all kinds of stuff. So that's really what I'm looking forward to here in a couple weeks.
Yeah, it's a great event. And on the flip side, you do one that same format essentially, but everybody heads over to Washington, D.C. to essentially do the same thing. Can you tell us a little bit about that and sort of what some of the what makes that trip so special or unique?
Yeah, absolutely. The federal government is so interesting. It works on such a different time scale than we do at the county or Olympia does, right? There's these huge pieces of legislation that take a decade to pass, and it's all these little pieces that we have to work on. And what's been really great about the group that we bring over from Spokane, again, a relatively large group, much larger than I've seen other communities be able to send in other areas of the state. It's really a great opportunity to all of us go over there. We chat with some really important leadership. There's a lot of folks in our delegation from Washington State that are in really high places in DC right now, and we can talk about federal legislation, talk about federal spending. How do we craft that? How do we make that accessible to our region, and how do we bring missions back to Fairchild, all those things that help our community grow. This year we're going back there in April, and so I'm really excited to bring a lot of folks. If anybody's interested in that, I know. Are you planning on coming out? Are you coming with us?
I will be there.
That's awesome. Well, anybody that wants more information can always go to greaterspokane.org/events and check out that page there.
All right. And we do have such a powerful delegation. When you look at Washington State in Olympia, or I mean in DC, that's such a powerful delegation with the positions of leadership and positions as chairmanships, and so I mean it makes a difference when we can go over and connect with them and make sure that we're conveying sort of our advocacy on the things that we'd like to see in DC. And it really makes an impact. It truly does. One of the things that I know GSI is supporting the county's efforts on seeking some capital funds to possibly make some upgrades or renovations to a Vista Stadium. Can you talk about what GSI sees as the benefit of that, and why you've agreed to sort of take a leading role in helping advocate for some of those dollars?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the private sector, especially in Washington State, has a really good history of stepping in and supporting these kind of general, broad community initiatives, really with an eye to what makes our communities great, what makes them more livable, what makes them more attractive to employees and businesses and that kind of stuff. And baseball's been a huge part of that. I mean, when Nintendo stepped up to help save the Mariners, there's, this is a long-standing history, Slade Gordon and such. And so we're, with that in our minds, kind of understanding that this kind of improvement, making sure the Indians stay here, making sure we still have a high level of minor league baseball, well. Really important to the community, really important to businesses, and really important for GSI because of that.
All right. Some of the other things that we've seen recently is GSI has been getting involved with some public safety initiatives. And could you explain to our audience sort of, why an organization like GSI would see that as being an important issue to be involved with?
So to my mind and to some of the folks that I've spoken with, this is the first time that GSI, excuse me, is kind of forging ahead into this area. And talking to my colleagues across the state, this is also kind of the first time that chambers across the state are really taking a strong stance on this. A lot of it goes back to these organized retail crime rings that we've seen pop up, a lot of the issues with employee safety when it comes to some of the violence that's happening connected with that, and really just are allowing our business owners to do what they do best, to run their business, to bring their services into our community, and to be able to do that without having to worry about their employees being harmed or their property being destroyed or stolen. Yeah, really important for our business community.
All right. It's always difficult to know sort of, what's going to cross the finish line, what's not. But what do you think are the best opportunities for our region that we could see this session?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as much as I do that every legislative session, you go in thinking you're thinking of, talking about this set of issues, and then all of a sudden this massive thing pops up, and that becomes the thing that everybody's talking about. We're having that right now with the North Spokane corridor. We kind of thought generally that we'd be talking about these kinds of things, but I mean, I haven't spent a minute on the clock that I haven't been working on the North Spokane corridor since the session started. So really looking to protect the timeline there to make sure that the east side of the state doesn't get forgotten when it comes to our major transportation needs, and really one of the only major investments that Spokane has seen on the state level in a number of years. So this is something that has been identified since the 1940s as a need for our community. We broke ground almost 20 years ago. And so this is really something that that has taken all of my time, and I'm really hoping that we can get kind of back on track with that. Outside of that, we're hoping for there's a lot of consensus around police vehicle pursuits. That's part of our public safety initiative. We almost got there last session, and I think we just need to push that guy over the finish line. That's going to bring a lot of changes to our community. A lot of the issues, again, in public safety with the Blake decision, there seems to be a lot of consensus in Olympia that what we're doing now doesn't work, and so we're really hoping that we're able to change the structure of how we kind of treat narcotics possession in Washington State. So I'm seeing a lot of that get over the finish line. We did a lot of work over the interim to make sure a lot of the licensure, especially with the phlebotomist stuff, that we got all the stakeholders on board, that there's consensus, that it's non-controversial. But you said, anything can happen, and so we're really hoping that we've done our homework there, and we'll see here shortly if anybody objects to the work we're trying to do here.
On the federal side, there's been a lot of talk about the CHIPS bill, and about the possibility of opportunities for our region with that. Can you tell our audience a little bit about what the CHIPS bill is and how GSI is working on that, and what some of those potentials are for our region?
Yeah. I mean, as you remember, the CHIPS bill went through a number of different names. It's been called probably 8 things since we first started working on it. But really, it's an opportunity. It was kind of come out of the pandemic and realizing how fragile some of our supply chain is, especially when it comes to the things that we need to operate, our cell phones or our cars.
Semiconductors were
exactly
big deal.
Exactly. And so this was a push by the federal government in ways that we agree with, in ways that we probably thought were a bad idea, to really shore up that supply chain. But now that money is there, and all the executive departments are all working on it, really making sure that Spokane is competitive when it comes to particularly the tech hub section. These are our regional centers for innovation. We've had a really good track record here on creating clusters, which is kind of what our state calls, what the federal government calls a hub. So all these things are playing into our ability to bring some federal support to expand our economy and expand our role in research and development, whether it's at WSU or Gonzaga or any of the other great institutions that we have here. we're really looking at a way to bring more expertise around advanced manufacturing, around pharmaceuticals. So a lot of the community is still kind of taking a look at what that's going to be.
Okay.
And we're still early in the process. The federal government really has not put out a ton of guidance on what the tech hub is supposed to look like, but we're looking at models that the federal government has used in the past, as well as models that are coming out of states that were discussed kind of during the bill writing process as a way to prepare our regional economy for something like this.
Okay. And now this year, our very own Congresswoman Kathy McMorris Rodgers will be chair of the House Energy and Commerce Committee. What are some of the things that you're looking at there, opportunities and things that you're going to be kind of pushing for now that we have, such such strong representation on such a powerful committee like that?
Yeah, it's been really wonderful. We have a great relationship with the Congresswoman's office, and we've been able to take a look at kind of what the next few years looks like for her, and couldn't be more proud to have her chairing such an important committee. Yeah. A lot of what we've discussed with her is taking a lot of the lessons we've learned as a state about inexpensive power, about clean power, and the attractiveness that it has for the economy. And for bringing in new and innovative employers and all kinds of stuff. So we're really looking at taking a lot of the lessons that we have as Eastern Washington and taking this as an opportunity to share that out and really kind of take the next step for, what's the next step for nuclear energy, especially what's the next step for hydro? How do we make those technologies even more effective? And then how do we use them to grow our economy and to make everybody's lives better? So a lot of really cool stuff, and she's such a visionary for our region, and so it's really exciting to be able to work with her and her team. All right.
Well, Jake, it has been an absolute pleasure to speak with you today. I think we could probably go on for an hour. This to me, this stuff is fascinating, but I'm afraid we are out of time today. But really, I want to thank you so much for being here and enjoying it, and really just sharing so much valuable information about what GSI does, the impact it has on our community, and really, I think the strong message is how important it is to have a connection with your local elected officials, be involved. So much is going on, and so thank you so much for joining us here today.
Well, great. It's been awesome to nerd out with you for a little bit on some policy.
All right. Well, folks, thank you all for joining us today. As a reminder, a video of today's Spotlight can always be accessed on our Spokane County homepage or on our Spokane County YouTube page. Thank you again for joining us today. I'm your County Commissioner, Josh Kerns, and this has been another episode of Spokane County Spotlight.